Hey everyone, in this video I want to share a brief history of standardized mathematics assessment in the United States. Something I get asked a lot about, and it's something that also a lot of times students don't understand the difference between assessment that is a standardized form and the types of assessments that we do maybe on a daily basis as teachers that are more informal, and also the other types of non-standardized assessments that we might use in order to try to make sense of what people know and measure different things from a teaching perspective. So a lot of this comes from the History of School Mathematics 2-volume set. So as we get started here, in 1865 is the first thing that that maybe has a feel of standardized assessment, where New York administered the first Regents exam to establish a standard for state aid to schools. So it was created for the purpose of dispersing funds to schools in need. And later, this same exam was being used to determine state college admissions. And then, of course, then we go into the 20th century. And during the 20th century, we had the IQ test that was developed. Multiple choice format came into existence. We had a focus on what's called scientific management, which was largely a focus on efficiency, required attendance at school. There were a lot of new immigrations to the United States, and there was the abolition of child labor. So a lot changed about schools and education in the United States at the same time as these standardized assessments were coming into use. So some of these, in 1909, S.A. Curtis developed the first arithmetic test, which was used in a single school. And by the 1914-15 school year, we had about 500,000 of his tests being sold in 42 states. And then other assessments were soon in competition, which I've listed quite a few here. The Bobbitt's arithmetic test, the Boston tests, the Buckingham scale for problems in arithmetic, and on it goes. And then by 1918, there were at least 17 arithmetic and 10 algebra and geometry assessments on the market, including practice tests for them. In 1926 was the first SAT, which 8,040 students took. 30 years later, we had 155,000 students, and 30 years after that, over 1 million students taking the SAT. If we look at pre-World War I, 1914 to 1918, okay, achievement tests were in wide use at that time, and tracking was being implemented pretty heavily. So by 1935, 75% of the 150 largest school systems used these achievement tests to track students, which we could have a whole nother conversation about the hugely negative implications that has had on our education system. During World War I, intelligence assessments were administered to 2 million recruits. In the 1930s and 40s, we had large advances in measurement, largely due to advances in statistics. And then we had a sort of big takeover of behaviorist psychology, and one of the implications of that was the development of the ITBS assessment. And then if we go to the 1950s to 1970s, in the early 50s, there was a general belief that mathematics teaching in K-12 was a failure. And then in 1957, Sputnik launched, which worried a lot of people. And then in 1958, we had the National Defense Education Act, which provided a lot of money for curriculum development, which helped launch, for those of you that are interested, the new math curriculum. Not the new math that's talked about today, but the first new math, I guess we could say, that took hold in the 60s. In 1963, the first NAEP, NAEP was established, and the first assessment was in 1969, which is the National Assessment of Educational Progress, whose goal it is to provide a description of what students know in the United States. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act was put into law. We had also the Economic Opportunity Act, which established Title I funds and Head Start. And then in 1965, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and then 1975, Education for All Handicapped Children Act. And something that I'm going to sort of pose and then let you think about is So who qualifies for these services that were just initiated? The Title I, the Head Start, and how were these services decided upon? How was success measured? Okay, I mean, a lot of these assessments are being used for that, right? In 1967, we had the first International Mathematics Study, the FIMS, and this is a bit of a spoiler alert here, but guess who didn't rank first, or second, or third, or fourth? And guess who ranked at the highest of that? I bet anyone who's paying attention to international assessments today can guess these things. It was not the United States, contrary to popular belief. And then in 1980 to 1982, there was the second International Mathematics Study. Again, guess who didn't rank first or second or third? The United States has a long history of being sort of middle of the pack. And then in 1983, we had the sort of earth-shattering A Nation at Risk report. And this quote from it that I pulled out here: if an unfriendly foreign power had attempted to impose on America the mediocre educational performance that exists today, we might well have viewed it as an act of war. This is pretty strong and perhaps unnecessary language, I would say. But it sort of captures the feeling of many during this time and the push to reform education, especially mathematics education and science education in the United States. And so this sort of prompted more testing. In 1991, we had the International Assessment of Educational Progress. In 1995, the third International Mathematics and Science Study. So remember, there was the first one and the second one. Now we have the third one, which that then became TIMSS, the Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study. They didn't want to change their acronym again every single time they did this test. And we also have the PISA, the Program for International Student Achievement. And so those have been going on since 2000. The TIMSS, once they change their name, it's about every 3 years: 2008, 2015, 2019, and so on. And there we are to today. So these assessments have only become more common over time, and I would ask that you sort of reflect on these ideas as you think about assessment and consider its role in education, in both a positive and a negative way. What are the benefits and what are the challenges that this poses to our education system, and how can we reform the way we use and perhaps even administer these types of assessments? I hope this has been helpful for you, and let me know how you feel about this in the comments.